Hello and a very warm welcome to this live performance of Being Mr. Wickham. My name's Alistair Watley, I'm the Artistic Director of the Original Theatre Company, and on behalf of all of us, we're thrilled that you can be joining us for this, our first ever live streaming, direct from the Theatre Royal in Bury St Edmunds. Now, before we go live to the theatre and join Libby Purvis, who's going to be introducing the show, we thought we'd whet your appetites by sharing some interviews with director Guy Unsworth and the designer Libby Watson, who are speaking to you from the rehearsal room in London.
How does it feel being back in a rehearsal room? It's amazing, really. It feels, on the one hand, it feels like such a long time to wait, and yet it feels very familiar, and it's great in that respect. It feels like going home, I guess. It's just been really brilliant to work on this, and to work on this with Adrian. We did a lot of work in advance on Zoom, and that's a new experience. But it was really helpful just in terms of getting used to delivering something through a camera. So it's been an exciting opportunity because we get to blend so many different art forms, really. And I really wanted it to feel like not just a theatre piece, not just a piece for camera, but something that could blend those into something that feels like a piece of its own and a form of its own. And it's brilliant to be working on it. So it's a daunting challenge, but an exciting opportunity as well.
A rehearsal room is always really good fun, and I really like being back with a sort of creative team and being able to kind of start playing again. I've done so much on Zoom, I'm so tired of it. It's just really nice to have something physical in the room. We've already kind of brought props and furniture in, and having a model box and showing people what something is physically going to look like is great. It's good fun.
What did we do on Zoom and what did we wait to do in the rehearsal room? I think the early parts of the process was about, we were able to have a bit of time to look at the piece and look at the piece as a piece of writing first before we locked it in. It's a huge learn for Adrian. So we wanted to make sure that we'd had a really good crack at making sure that it was in the best possible shape before committing it to memory, I guess. So we did a lot of that work early on. So we'd worked for a good few weeks before we even met each other in person. But I think that part of that process actually, whilst that element of the process was really about working the script, it started to move towards rehearsing and also really started to help me in terms of what that relationship was going to be between Adrian and the camera, and also gave birth to quite a few ideas. It was really fascinating watching Adrian try and communicate those ideas, and what the camera allowed us to do, or rather what Zoom allowed us to do, was to find that relationship where it felt quite private and conspiratorial and intimate. And that is something that we certainly can do on film, and I wanted to hold on to those elements so that when we did place it in a theatre, we held on to the theatrical nature of the writing, but the intimacy of film.
The challenges of designing this piece is initially working on my own and showing things to Guy on screen. I mean, we had one Zoom chat where we were on FaceTime and Zoom, and I was moving my iPhone around the model box so that Guy could see camera shots and how it would look. And that would have been so much easier, sort of just us in the room together. And I feel also, I think, because we've done quite a lot of it on Zoom and on screen, the sort of the process of showing people where you're at with the model and where you are with the design has to be a bit more finished and polished. Whereas when you have somebody who comes to your studio, I can take bits in and out, and it can be a bit more eclectic, and bits of white card go in and out of the model. Whereas this, I think you feel a bit more on show because you are only showing it on screen and you're quite aware of that. So I think that is a challenge. But yet, because we're doing this for camera, it's also helped us to a certain extent because we've had to look at it in that way, which I think we don't normally. So it's been good for that. And in terms of things like costume, it's very hard to do costume at the moment because there's a lot of things closed. A lot of the big companies are only doing film at the moment. There's a lot of restriction. And I really wanted to get the costume, the feel of it right, so that it felt, again, that we'd moved into the Victorian and we weren't still in the Regency, but it's still got to be Wickham. It's still got to be dapper and sexy and fun and, you know, all the things that he represents.
What are the challenges of directing to camera? Well, I mean, the first thing I should say is that my form is theatre. I'm a theatre director first and foremost, so it's quite new. It's a new medium for me. It's a new way of working. But I think what separates this from television and film is that most of the time actors are directing their work to another actor. And so the actual idea of directing something directly to a camera is strange. I think it's quite strange from a viewer's point of view as well. And we wanted to embrace that. We wanted to find those moments where it was really important to actually reach almost through the camera to the person sitting at home, you know, by their laptop in front of the television, and to say, yes, we're here for you, and not for them to be a viewer looking at something which was created for something else. So for someone else, it was absolutely to be something to be experienced from the other side of the camera. So it is a challenge, but it's exciting, and it's amazing how much nuance that you can get just from looking at something through a screen.
The design concept for Mr. Wickham, it's a collaborative thing. It came from lots of talk with Guy, the director, and we wanted to make this a very. We really wanted to engage with the idea that it's going to be on camera and not just make a theatre piece that's only going to be viewed from an auditorium. So we were trying to really push that idea and make something that felt very much like a hybrid of a theatre piece and a piece for camera as well, so that we talked a lot about shots and the discussion of what we would see in the background and how important that was, that we weren't just in a black box of a theatre, that we were doing a bit more to it than that. So we created a world that is, as seen here, it is kind of theatrical, but it's also, every time we zoom in, we're seeing some other part of the theatre or the theatre world as well, and we're acknowledging that side of it a bit more.
What's it like to direct a one-hander? Well, it's a very personal relationship. It's important that relationship is strong, and I think from a director's point of view, there's so much responsibility placed on the actor to hold so much of it, the rhythm, the energy of the piece. You're not blessed with those sort of the moments where somebody else just comes in and can shake up a scene. You're those events that often create gear shift, somebody arriving, something happening. Those things aren't there. So you have to find a shape that still finds that dynamic, still finds the variation in a piece. But as a director, you're very much reliant on the actor being able to do that. So I hope that we've had a really good fun time doing it, and that's a big part of it, is to enjoy creating that side of things. I think what's interesting with this one is that I'm not just working with Adrian as an actor, but was also working with him as a writer as well. And so the process for me is not just about bringing an actor on board what a writer has done, but actually trying to tease out what a writer is trying to get towards in their initial vision, and that's been great, and we're still talking, so that's a help.
My process as a designer starts with cleaning the entire house. So my house has to be kind of spotless and tidy. That's kind of first, and I'm usually doing that and thinking, and it comes from different places, you know, what I'm going to come up with on the day. But I have to have quite a lot of thinking time. It's then references, and then it's sometimes something that just comes out of the blue that you sort of wake up with in a morning. And I work in many different ways. Sometimes I draw, sometimes I technically draw, CAD draw, sometimes I collage. It really varies from show to show. And on this one, it felt very much like I needed to really look at the period, but I needed to also look at the period beyond the Regency, because that's where we are now. And that was quite important to kind of go into that mid-Victorian, I think, for this. Just that sort of journey and not be too stuck in the sort of Austen world where he was, but the world that he's in now.
Being a writer myself, how does that help the process? I think it's more than anything, it's an understanding of how personal that experience is. I think it's important that writers are their own voices, and I could never write what Adrian's written on this. It's a fantastic piece, but it's very much his writer's voice, and I think that's what's so important. Is I'm not coming in to rewrite it for him. That would be absolutely the wrong way to go, and I'd never wanted to do that. I've never needed to do that. So it's just having an understanding of how a writer works, and to give them the time and space to do that, I think, is important. Something that we both had a conversation about, which is that we've both done essentially adapting. And I think what's interesting about this is that it's a brand new play, but it's based on an existing character, and it's very easy as a writer to lose confidence in your own work. And I think what's so great about this is that what we do wholeheartedly believe, if you're ever feeling in doubt about some writing, is to believe in the character that was created by someone else. And we've always taken a great interest and intrigue in who Wickham really is. How would I describe this in 3 words? Exciting.
Heartfelt.
Funny.
Funny.
Sexy.
And sexy.
Although Adrian told me to say that.